Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks you all for joining us today. My name is David Alvarez. I'm a researcher at Newcastle University, working with agent-based models, ABMs, as part of the DARE Hub. I'm pleased to host this webinar about the use of ABMs for a decarbonized and resilient transport sector. For those of you who may not be familiar with the DARE Hub, I would like to provide you with a brief introduction. DARE is the national hub for decarbonized, adaptable, and resilient transport infrastructures. This hub brings together UK stakeholders, including industry, government, and civic partners, to find viable pathways and solutions for a transition to a resilient net zero transport system. It is funded by EPSRC and the Department for Transport and comprises a team of researchers from Newcastle, Cambridge, Glasgow, Hereward, and Anglia Ruskin. In today's webinar, we'll be exploring how transport ABMs can help tackle the pressing challenges of decarbonization and create a more resilient transport sector. We are going to hear from our two speakers, Dr. Patricia Franco from the Connected Places Catapult and Dr. Joska Bischoff from the Swiss Federal Railways. There will be time for Q&As after each presentation, so if you have any queries, please feel free to submit them into a chat at any time or raise your hands after the presentation to ask any questions. So after this short introduction, we can start with our first presenter. It is Patricia Franco, and she's going to present a project where they simulate scenarios to decarbonize road freight. So all yours, Patricia.
Thank you, David. You should be able to see my screen now.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today for this first webinar. I'm Dr. Patricia Franco. I'm a lead demand modeler in the modeling and appraisal team at Connected Places Catapult, which is part of a network of 9 research and technology organizations which are spread across the UK. The Connected Places Catapult has been formed merging Transport Systems Catapult, where I joined 9 years ago now, and the Future Cities Catapult to create connected places. We work on transport and mobility, built environment, climate change, and critical infrastructure, health and well-being, public places, and decision-making. And today I'm going to present you the results of a program of work which has been developed in the past 7 years and was looking specifically and understanding how multimodality and the integration of on-demand mobility was going to impact the movements of people and goods. We started this work with the Department for Transport, moving on some of the Innovate UK work developed under the Model Project, which use agent-based modeling to understand the integration of demand-responsive transport with the public transport systems. And we soon found out that the traditional Forster model is too aggregated to understand the nature of these on-demand, flexible, most of the time digitally enabled services. So we looked at understanding how this agent-based modeling can perform in urban and rural areas, and how the activity-based model can integrate with agent-based model. Usually agent-based model can be based on different type of approach. The one that we have explored is an activity-based model, which is usually extensively mobile nectar data and integration with other data sets available in every places. And in doing so, we developed two demonstrators. The demand project will look at on-demand mobility in the Newcastle upon Tyne. The activity-based modeling, which is looking at rural areas at various population density, and we studied Somerset, Essex, and Northumberland. And then the rural demonstrator, which is the RISE project that I'm going to present today, which specifically look at the integration of agent-based modeling with emissions modeling and understanding how rural areas can impact urban areas, especially the decarbonization of the urban areas when we look at last mile deliveries. This project was jointly funded by the Department for Transport, the Office for Science, and the Decarbonization Freight team at the Department for Transport, and was directly linked to the Decarbonization Transport Plan, which in one of these actions was looking at decarbonizing last mile deliveries. There are many studies which are looking to urban areas, but there are not enough studies looking at rural areas, and this is mostly linked to the lack of data and the lack of understanding of how urban and rural interact between each other. Last mile deliveries is a particularly complex context because we have a very fragmented market. Majority of the companies are not keen to share the data between each other. So the policymakers are usually less aware of what is going on in a regional or national level because of the lack of data. In this project, we specifically look at assessing the impact of last mile deliveries, but looking across all supply chains and all commodities that are being transported, and looking at the interaction between urban and rural areas. We wanted to benchmark policy interventions, providing relevant data, and also understanding what might be the emissions that are currently generated by last mile deliveries. We know that from 2020, 19% of total emissions in the UK are linked to last mile deliveries, which equals the emissions from the heavy goods vehicles, which is a sector that is more heavily regulated and attracted more attention. But last mile deliveries are actually becoming more emitting, and are actually impacting the health of people in urban and rural areas. There is a lack of data sharing across the sector. The freight industry considered this type of data commercially sensitive. So in order to overcome these obstacles, we looked at trip chaining from mobile network data. The output of this project, it looked at the integration of agent-based and emissions modeling to assess the impact of fleet electrification, demand consolidation, and also the modal shift towards lighter modes, especially e-cargo bikes. The model represents the active population in the Northeast, is at a regional scale but stretched out nationally because mobile network data are continuously developed. It represents nearly 1 million agents, of which 50,000 agents are actually moving for last mile delivery purpose. I'm also leaving you some of the papers that we have been developed during the years. The framework is very similar to many other agent-based modeling. The core of the RISE framework is the demand model, which was developed in 2019, with a population which has been updated to 2021. We got a multimodal network, which includes road-rail network. We got quite a lot of information on the land use and the points of interest that you got in the Northeast, and the vehicle fleets has been updated. The activity-based model is used to generate daily travel diaries using trip chaining, which I'm going to describe more in the next slides. And then we have a public transport system which includes bus, underground, and rail, which was developed together in collaboration with Nexus, the passenger transport executives in the Northeast. Agents are generated by census data, and we also use mosaic data to understand better the segmentation of the population. And the output of the Maxim model, which is generated, has been used as an input of Ripple, which is an emission modeling tool which was specifically developed by Newcastle University, by our colleagues from Future of Mobility team, which is looking at every single trips generated from the trip chaining. And then we have used the emission factors toolkit from DEFRA to calculate emissions for road. And you can have emissions aggregated for road, for zones, or for local authorities areas if necessary. The advantage of using a large-scale agent-based modeling is that we got a higher granularity of information. We understand better the travel behavior deriving from people, and also in this case from last mile delivery drivers. And the trip chains allow to study the door-to-door movements. At the best of my knowledge, Ripple is still the first UK-based emissions model which integrates with Maxim and use the latest emission factors toolkit from DEFRA. The activity-based model is deriving from another project which is called Assets for Rural Mobility. We have the possibility to transfer the tools that we have developed over the years and plug these in as an extra feature for Maxim. We looked at understanding the travel behavior. We chose April 2021, 20 days to understand people movements. This was a time which was still a transition from what we had in the past before pandemic towards the new normal, and we have a 24-hour distribution of the demand with an increased understanding of the behavior around the inset peaks, both in the morning and in the afternoon. And for studies last mile deliveries, we have extended this segmentation further, looking at overnight trips, but also at early morning when we got majority of last mile deliveries starting. The peculiarity of this mobile network data acquisition is that we have nearly 2,000 zones at a lower super output area, and we have acquired data at the same granularity both for urban and rural areas. In the past, when we looked at the rural areas, we found that the mobile network data aggregated at trip chaining performs really well in rural areas because travel patterns usually in rural areas are more complex, longer, and therefore the triangulation with the cell towers performs as much as in the urban areas. We have developed at the Connected Places Catapult a data exploratory framework which enhances the mobile network data using time of travel and land use data. Specifically for the RISE project, we have increased the type of logistics activities covering warehouses, storage depots, the postal sorting, and distribution centers. And the segmentation of the population is usually segmented further. So we looked at home, work, education trips, leisure and shopping trips, and we have divided both trips for heavy goods vehicles and last mile deliveries. You can clearly see the difference between the two because a last mile delivery drivers usually can have 30, 50, 60 trips in one day, whilst an heavy goods vehicles, much longer trips, different time of the day of travel, and they tend to travel beyond the northeast boundaries. And it's completely different from the travel pattern that you might have from a residence, which can have something between 2 and 6 trips in one day, and the trip chaining is also distributed differently over the day. These graphs specifically refer to the process that is followed by the network provider. In this case, we have Telefonica providing trip chaining, and what we did to enhance the trip chaining. And we have basically used the origin destination matrix and the trip chaining from the mobile network data provider and land use data in order to create this data exploratory framework, which allows us to assign purpose and mode of transport to each of the chains. You can also refer to the publication that I put in these slides for more information on the methodology. The scenarios that we explored were 3. Specifically, we looked at understanding the impact of electrification, the impact of introducing consolidation centers, and the modal shift towards lighter modes for last mile deliveries. The electrification of the fleets was the first scenario, so where we run Maxim and also we calculate emissions using Ripple. There are 3 scenarios that we have considered. The base case scenario is, of course, for 2021, for the population has been built for that type of time. Then we have 2031 and 2035, where we have used the adoption trends from the Department for Transport to understand the uptake for EVans in the Northeast. So we're starting with 0.3% of battery electric vehicles, and we are expecting 20% in 2031 and 40% in 2035, where we will also have the additional assumption that every vehicle, every EVans will be zero at tailpipe by 2035. In doing so, we calculated emissions. We looked at vans, and we calculated that 50% of emissions will be reached by 2035. But this is mostly because we have considered a gradual adoption of EVans across the 3 years. In doing so, you don't have a perception of what are the hotspots, what are the criticalities, where are the areas that might adopt quickly the vans, and which area will fall behind. So instead, we looked at some initial assumption in the second and first scenarios, where we consider the current technologies, but also the next to the market technologies for e-vans and e-bikes as well, and considering the type of distance that could be covered through e-vans and bikes, and what are the current mileage that could not be met through electrified mode of transport. We found based on initial knowledge and the maxim run of the model, we identified 6 consolidation centers, combining in the center of Newcastle e-bikes and e-vans together in order to support the low emission zone that is in place. We have 2 consolidation centers that are serving Northumberland in the northern part and the eastern part, and 1 in Sedgefield that is serving Durham and also Tees Valley. We found that majority of the trips actually can be shifted to e-vans or e-bikes, especially the e-vans at high specification, both in County Durham and Northumberland. But at present, we can't electrify the entire trips linked to the last mile deliveries. If we represent this, this is a graphical representation of the maximum output in GIS. We can clearly see that the more we progress towards 2031 and 2035, the areas that are impossible to decarbonize are merely concentrated in the main road, which is natural. Natural is going to happen, and motorway will be more difficult to decarbonize. But there is also an issue in connecting the east part of the Northeast with the west side as well. So we will need to look at potential intervention to cover better those areas and support them towards the shift. We have also analyzed the outputs, the data output from the second scenario. So this is a simulation deriving from Maxim with the flows in 2021, which assigned e-bikes, e-van, and IC vans to each areas and council in the Northeast. And we have a breakdown that distributes the new modes, e-bikes, e-van, and vans, also taking into account the distance that could be covered. It is much easier to use e-bikes in city centers. Durham, Newcastle, Gateshead are the ones that are more popular, but e-vans are actually able to cover 86% of the 86.5% of the distance travels at the moment, and only 5% is not possible to be decarbonized. So this will require further intervention if we plan to reach 100% by 2035. So to conclude, our main result is that if we look just at the electrifying the last mile deliveries, we are not going to reach or we are not going further from 50%, and this is an optimist assumption, because we have considered that everybody that could switch to electric will switch, but we know that this is not the case, because there will be also an element of behavioral change. Combining electrification and consolidation centers, although we have not considered the reduction of the trips due to the actual consolidation, we enable the shift towards zero emission transport modes, reaching 96% of reduction of emissions. Again, the implementing a reduction of trips due to the consolidation, using also the time to recharge the vans to consolidate, is a good hypothesis that is not considered a blocker, although initial meetings that we had with industry was considered a blocker in itself. And the modal shift has revealed that e-bikes are actually perform really well with the current technology. So it is a matter of supporting the correct business model within urban areas and combining the e-cargo bikes with the vans for those items that are difficult or too heavy to transport, in order to reach the maximum benefits for the combination of these two modes of transport. Regarding the agent-based model in itself, it was possible to understand the various decarbonization strategies for the local authorities, both at urban level and the rural areas, and the rural level. The fact that we have extended the high granularity zoning, including rural areas, is actually allowed us to understand the impact of COVID-19 changes into rural areas. We could be able to see the increase in last mile deliveries, especially in the city center, compared to 2019 levels. This type of approach remove the silos from what is usually considered very good modeling developed for urban areas, which are considering data-rich environments. By using mobile network data allowed us to increase the granularity also in rural areas and extend the same methodology that we are using urban also in rural. The model is modular, scalable, and transferable. So if you want to refine a certain area, Maxima allows you to refine a specific area of the model. All the tools that we have used over the years have been transferred to the Northeast and also the other areas of the UK. So it's quite a good investment if you start and shift towards agent-based modeling, to keep in mind the transferability of the model itself, and also the modularity of every plugin that are being developed to support the network, the fleet, and the population generation. It represents a transport digital twins. The more we acquire data at higher granularity, and we could reach real time one day when computational power is strong enough. We have established the value of mobile network data at trip chain level. These anonymized and aggregated source of data are able to really describe the door-to-door movements of people and goods. And the way we have used the agent-based model and activity-based modeling over the years has demonstrated the value of this data when used together with data set that we are currently collected anyway. So it was absolutely a positive experience for us using agent-based modeling, which could be useful both for decarbonization and climate resilience. I've also left you some of the executive summary that we have developed together with the Department for Transport, in case you want to read more about the 3 projects. Thank you for listening. If you have any question.
Thank you, Patricia, for your presentation. I think there is a bit of echo. Can you hear me now properly?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks again for your presentation. I think there are couple of questions in the chat. I think we are not going to be able to ask all of them because we're running out of time, so we can pick some of them from the chat. So we can start with the first one from Dana Nutomo, and he's asking about how did you generate the activity for the last mile delivery drivers? Because they are saying that there are different journeys every day, and is it based on historical data?
So these are the mobile nectar data. The project was developed between 2021 and 2022. The mobile nectar data were acquired for March 2021. We acquired both trip chaining and origin destination matrices. When you look at trip chaining, if you follow the steps of the framework that I showed you before, you can actually divide passengers and goods based on the type of travel patterns during the 24 hours that they have. As I mentioned before, residential commuting patterns are quite different from a last mile delivery driver. So you can clearly see that last mile delivery drivers start early in the morning. They have several stops, specifically during the interpeaks. And then they visited certain areas. So it's really important to use good land use information because vans usually stops in distribution center, warehousing. And what we have done is layering this information together with the mobile nectar data in order to label each person that was moving in the network, either as a resident or as a delivery drivers or an heavy goods vehicle driver. And you can see from the travel patterns, I'm not able to show you the videos from Maxim, but you can see from the travel patterns that is somebody doing deliveries.
Okay, thank you. There is another question from Jin, which is asking about what are the assumptions or additional cost for delivery via the consolidation centers.
We have not used the cost deriving from the model. We are only looked at emissions modeling and how much we can abate emissions in the area. So this is not something that we have explored with the model within the project.
Okay. And we can go with the last one from Cassia. And how are you modeling the events modes in Maxim? How is it different from, example, the basic car mode?
In Maxim, you define the fleet of all the vehicles allowed in the model itself. When we introduce events into the network, we provide all the characteristics of the vans itself, dimensions, speed, acceleration, of the range. So basically the agents knows that needs to stop when they're reaching 10% of the range. We have assigned agents to the EVAN mode. In this way, so it's an initial assignment. We don't have the possibility at the moment to have an ICE van driver that at some point decide to switch on an event. All the last mile delivery drivers are driving either ICE vans or evans since the beginning in order to fulfill their travel patterns.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll have time for an extra one, and this is coming from Antonin Danalet, and he's asking about how are trips stops detected in the mobile network data.
So the mobile nectar data derives from call details records, both for active events and passive events. So active events is when somebody is calling you or texting you. Passive events is when the mobile phone connects with the cell tower, and it's a triangulation. And usually the network provider, we work with both BT, Telefonica, and Vodafone. They do a triangulation before giving you the data. So when we ask for origin destination matrices, they give you origin destination a single trip. So when you ask for trip chaining, you got anonymized aggregated mobile nectar data in a string. So basically, you know exactly in which area the person stops. And if the person stops for half an hour, that creates a record. So anything below half an hour is not recorded. So one of the inherited limitation of the mobile network data, for example, is that you can't model where short trips. But for example, when you need to model short trips, you don't use mobile network data from cell towers, but you use mobile network data, for example, from the geomobile network data provided by BT, which are much smaller granularity, or you tend to shift the data source. When you want to study active travel, you usually use proximity data. It's important to understand what you want to model. And in the case of RISE, we want to have a representative sample of the population because we wanted to understand the uptake of new mobility services and also how alternative fuels and electrification will impact on the entire population. So we have a representative sample. If this is not necessary, you can change the type of data that you use to describe your population and the travel diaries.
Okay, thank you very much, Patricia. I think we are just now running out of time, so we can move to our next presenter. Thanks again, Patricia. And our next presenter is Dr. Joska Bischoff, and he's going to present a case study about a new railway tunnel in Basel. So, Joska, it's all yours.
Hello, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, good, very well. Yeah, thank you very much, David, for giving me the floor. So I want to talk a bit about agent-based transport modeling at SBB, and also I brought one application, and that is, as you just said, a new railway tunnel in Basel. The table of contents for this short session is, first, I will tell you a little bit who we are and what we are doing, because I think it's important to know the context. I guess you realized I'm from the Swiss Railways, but what are we doing here actually? Because it's a bit different of how railways elsewhere in Europe work actually. Then I will tell you about our agent-based simulation model, and finally about that case study. Who we are and what we do. So the Swiss Federal Railways, we are an over 100-year-old railway company, and we operate both the rail network in Switzerland, most of the standard gauge railways, and we also operate the train services. So we are a combined operator, and we also operate the stations. So this is quite different from how railways are working in Europe most of the times these days, where this is somehow separated into different entities. We are roughly 35,000 employees, and we operate 11,000 trains a day. We do operate international connections into all our neighboring countries. As the Federal Railways, we are also the largest train operator in the country, and the system here is non-competitive. So it's all based on cooperation in between public transport operators rather than competition. This is also the one slide about the public transport in Switzerland. What I just said, we are a cooperative system. So you want seamless connections between trains and buses. So that means if a train arrives at a certain station, then the bus is usually waiting or leaving just shortly after, so that the overall travel chain is optimized at a reasonable speed. That also means that there is an integrated ticket system for the whole country. And in fact, there are many subscription plans that cover parts or the whole country, that make Switzerland one of the countries with many long distance commuters. So for example, commuting from Zurich to Bern, which is a 130-kilometer ride or 1 hour, is very typical. That also brings certain challenges, because you have people who have subscriptions and they're therefore not hard to steer. So there's almost no pricing involved in public transport planning in Switzerland. If we come to travel demand modeling at SBB, our main goals are, of course, service planning, and also fleet and infrastructure planning, as well as long-term strategical planning and long-term financial planning of the company. We are part of the service planning department, so this is also a little bit what is our nature. And our agent-based simulation model, so what I have to say about it is that there are two types of models being used at SBB. An aggregated model that uses a very classical 4-step process, and is used, for example, for rolling stock planning. And an agent-based model, and this is Simba-Mobi, which is based on a synthetic population for Switzerland, so roughly 8.5 million agents, and census data from the mobility and transport microcensus, which is a very valuable source because it reveals the mobility patterns of the country or the people living here, and then also road and rail supply, obviously a road network, and timetables for all kind of years that we have right now or in the future. And then we calibrate our model on that, and we get out of it a pretty standard output for an ABM. So we have individual daily activity plans, we have a mode choice for each trip, and we can, of course, aggregate these into numbers like traffic loads and distances and charts and all kind of stuff that you need from an ABM. I do have a little video about that, which shows you a little bit also the motivation why we are doing this. So I hope the video goes via Zoom, but as you can see, there's a clock in the top right, and that goes from 8 a.m. in the morning, and you can see that people are at home and people are slowly starting to go to work, and there's education popping up. From the type of video, you can already guess this is also Matsim involved. And then you can kind of see that people need to travel from one place to another. If they're traveling by car, then this is they're in little gray boxes. If they're traveling by train, or a bus, then they're on red boxes. And of course, they need to travel from one place to another, and some trains are better loaded than others. And of course, this can be aggregated over time. But what is really important for us, why we have this agent-based model, is that we understand how people are coming to and from train stations, for example, and what kind of customers we have at train stations. For example, here at this train station, we can see which subscriptions they have over the day. You can see the peaks of a certain station, or you can also see on a motorway who's using what kind of purpose, or who's traveling for what kind of purpose. And the other thing is we want to see how people are accessing our train stations. So, and here you have different train stations, and you see that in some places there's more walking to the station involved, whereas in some places there's far more public transport or coming by car to the station. And if you zoom closer into one certain station, this is now Baden, then you can see that some people accessing the station from closer, they're usually walking, and people coming from further away, they either take the bus if there's a bus line, or they come by car or by bike. And this kind of analysis is a very standard procedure that we do now. If a station is undergoing a renovation or a new or redesign, then we always look into such kind of things. And this is one thing why we use the model for. Of course, we also have the demographics of a single person. So there's individual decision making. People go to work, they have a job, they have a subscription, and then they spend some time at work, they have leisure activities in between work, and so on. So all these individual decisions, they then wrap up into an aggregated aggregation that also is very important for the actual model. The main steps of the model are three. So first of all, there's a synthetic population that we get either from data from the Federal Office of Statistics, or we have a forecast into the future, into 2040 and 2050. And this is something that is available in Switzerland, either on the market or just from public data. The second part, and this is our own development, is called Mobi Plans. So it's basically an ABM that creates activity-based demand as 24-hour plans. This is Python code living in PTV Visum, but that's a little bit optional. And then the main part for the actual traffic assignment and route choice and mode choice is a Matson model that was also addressed by Patrizia. And all these steps are person-specific and in that sense microscopic and iterative. That also means that we can forecast back. We can use the travel times and generate new plans out of it and so on. We can always loop back. The main use cases of the model are the development, of course, of public transport services. For example, the construction of new services or new lines. One of those examples I will give you now. Then also the analysis of the direct environment of railway stations. And the effect on land use, including new real estate, and what's the impact of the new real estate to public transport and to the transport in the city, and so on. And also future scenarios, for example, forecasting demographic change or spatial change, and also what happens with automated vehicles if they come. We could also look into electric vehicles, but it's not such a big issue for us as a railway operator. Our trains are electric anyway. And the one use case I brought is a new railway tunnel for the city of Basel. So the city of Basel is in northwestern Switzerland, and it borders directly. The city limits border directly with Germany and France. So that makes it a bit of a special city. Because also the commuter habits into the city are, in fact, very international. So you have people coming from France to work in Basel, and you have people commuting from Germany into Basel. The city isn't super big. It's only around 180,000 people living there. And you have roughly 40,000 commuters coming from abroad, and also several thousand coming from Switzerland itself. And right now, Basel is also, in terms of railway planning, a little bit interesting because there is a main Swiss station that's called Basel SBB. And then on the other side of the Rhine River, there's a German station called Badischer Bahnhof. And even though this is on Swiss soil, it's actually a train station operated by the German railways because it serves as a hub into several regions in southwestern Germany. So that makes it a very special thing, and it's an old treaty, over 100 years old, on why this station is there. So, but in fact, this is a German station in all kind of sense. So even like the station signs, they look as you were in Germany, even though you were in Switzerland. But still, it's within the city limits of Basel, and it's entirely Swiss. And there is an idea to build a new railway tunnel from the Swiss station to the German station that would allow local trains to loop through the city. And that's what, and it's called Herzstück. So basically, because it has then the whole railway system in Basel has the shape of a heart, a little bit. And this new railway tunnel would host at least one more station and directly in the city center of Basel, and perhaps another one in the northern outskirts. And it would also include 2 new tunnel stations in the Swiss station and in the German station. So overall, up to 4 new stations, and several kilometers of new tunnels would be built. The whole thing is currently in a comprehensive planning study and that has been granted from the Swiss government, and this study has already a volume of 30 million Swiss francs, so quite a big study. And also all intermediate steps are being planned for what would be necessary to build this. However, it has not been decided whether actually we will go forward with that. So that decision is due to be made until 2030, maybe a little earlier. And the estimated opening wouldn't be before the year 2050. So it's a very long-term scale that we're looking here. And with our Simba Mobi model, we can give a forecast of the origin destination flows of passengers on trains, quite obvious. We can also see how many passengers are there at new stations. So for example, that new station in Basel-Mitte. This is something other models have troubles with, and for us, this is very easy. And we can show also the approximate number of people at each station exit, for example, and also give a forecast about the maximum number of people on the train, which is very important if you need to evacuate a train in a train station. And this is all data that you would need for the infrastructure planning, and this is also what it's being used for. You can also use it for cost-benefit analysis, but this is not part of this project actually. Yeah, one example is, so right here you would have the Basel-Mitte station. And if you look at this station, which is now right here in the middle center of the picture, you would see that, for example, we expect something around 40,000 people boarding and alighting there each day. And 28,000 of them would access that new station by walk, and roughly 9,000 by tram. And then there's a little bit, some people coming by bus, bike, and some people would change trains there. And where would these people come from and go to? Just as a last picture, you see that they're mostly originating or have their destinations directly in the city center. Some of them take trams that go a little further out of the city, and some would access the station by bike. Yeah, to wrap up in 15 minutes, Simba Mobi, so the model helps us to understand the mobility behavior of both customers and non-customers of the railway. The model is very is a standard product, and we have many questions being asked about the model. And then there's a sentence in the wrap-up chart that hasn't been completed. The model is, yeah, well, it is. Well, sorry about that. And there are, yeah, what also needs to be said is this is a very large scale and quite complex model. And it needs quite a considerable effort to be maintained. For example, the update of the baseline model from 2017 to 2023 now almost took a year. So this is quite an effort and requires quite a bit of in-house knowledge, but luckily one that we can afford to do. Yeah. With that wrap up, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Joska, for your presentation. Yeah, there are a couple of questions in the chat. The first one is coming from Tim, and he's asking about the synthetic population. You said that the synthetic population is available for different sources, and he's interested in knowing if you can clarify if you've been building yourself the synthetic population from ground truth, or you get it from the Ministry of Transport or some other agencies.
So the synthetic population is built with data from the Office of Statistics and together with one company. But the good thing for anyone doing research is that there is an open data version of it available that is anonymized a little bit, and that can be just downloaded. This is actually a byproduct. So one of my colleagues here at SBB decided that we should publish this, and the Federal Office for Statistics agreed on that. So so this one can be accessed very easily.
Okay, thank you. Actually, he has another question that I was also planning to ask you as well, and it's about the future population. Are you getting the data as well from the same sources?
No, yeah, well, it takes the same sources as a base, and then there is a model called Falk that that company operates for us. And this is basically a combined land use and demographics and population model. And the future synthetic population is then was built by that company as a project, both for the Federal Office of Spatial Analysis and our and the SBB. And that one is not accessible, but yeah, then again, I think also not really required for research, because you could just take today's population and extrapolate that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And there is another question from Nujut. And how did you simulate the ABM, and what language are you using?
The ABM is completely is basically a step of discrete, well, a series of discrete mode choices. And we also have papers about that, and that's all Python code. Right now, that Python code lives in Visum, in the ABM part of PTV Visum. That makes it a bit complicated to use if you don't have a license for that. But we plan to separate the two in the next year. And
Okay.
actually that's also open source, so we're pretty open about publishing software actually.
Thank you. Another question from Cassia, and she's asking about the visualization tools that you're using. She says that pictures are quite beautiful.
Yeah, that's the video is made by VIA actually, and then those pages here, these are Python packages for the station analysis. I don't know which one, but quite oddly is but I can find that out. What is kind of funny is that the universal language of the company is always PowerPoint slides. So we actually have a converter from that converts takes the MATSIM output and converts it into a PowerPoint slides for a certain station by just hitting some buttons. And this is a standard product, but I find that kind of funny that in the end you always need PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you. And there is another question from Agdas. And how do you consider walking people? Which instruments do you use?
So walking in MATSIM is usually not simulated on the network, and by default we also don't do that. However, if you then look into certain stations, then and it is really a question on where to put exits, for example, for a new station, then we do a very simple method by extracting an OpenStreet network that also includes all food paths, and finding shortest paths and doing a little bit of randomization. And that gives a good result for our purpose.
Okay, thank you. And I have a question for you about resilience. And I know that your model is planning for the future, and you are considering how to shift people from cars to public transport. But I'm interested in knowing if you have plans to implement the impact of extreme weather events. Imagine an extreme rainfall event that is affecting either of the tunnels or either of the rail lines that you are simulating. Are you considering the impacts of those extreme events?
Yeah, so we had an extreme event in Switzerland by railway standards last year, because one of the main tunnels through the Alps was blocked for over a year after a freight train crashed, and that impact we have simulated both in the microscopic and the macroscopic model, and we can include these things. In the end, it's just a new timetable. What is more also in resilience is, of course, the whole pandemic part, because that hit the railway demand very heavily, and then we kind of had to include the aftermath of it, like working from home and so on. That was also a big issue. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I cannot see any other comments or questions in the chat. So in that case, we can conclude the seminar now. I would like to thank all the presenters to show us different case scenarios where the use of ABMs can help in achieving a decarbonized and resilient transport sector. Also, I would like to thank you all for attending this webinar. I hope you have enjoyed it and learned a few things. And we hope to see you soon in the following webinars. Enjoy the rest of the day, and thanks again. Bye.